from Saturday Down South, national columnist, and always follow him on Twitter at CJ O'Gara. And Connor, appreciate your time as always, man. What you got going on these days? You have I know the Combine was over this last weekend. That's nothing that I was really tuned into. There's tons of basketball. Got basketball tournaments this week. So what is it you're focusing on these days?
I am. I'll be dialed into basketball pretty much like starting Wednesday through the weekend. Adam Spencer heads up our basketball coverage and does such a great job for Saturday Down South in that department. But I'm actually just kind of getting caught up on things after spending a weekend. My brother was in town. His wife was in town. We actually went to Arnold Palmer Invitational down here in Orlando. We did that on Friday. So it was a sports weekend in some ways and kind of nice to be able to get away for a little bit. But, I saw, big news in the SEC was the Jaden Daniels edition by LSU. But, yeah, it's pretty much basketball mode from this point out, or me just getting mad at Combine stuff like Traylon Burks getting knocked by sites like PFF for not being DK Metcalf or Odell Beckham. So I guess, which is fair. I guess he's technically not. He is Traylon Burks. But, I'd say a variety of things are going on right now. But we'll get fully dialed into basketball probably later this week here.
Tell me what you think about Daniels to LSU, former Arizona State quarterback. Where does he fit in? Where does he fit in for Brian Kelly?
Well, I thought Miles Brennan was going to be the guy, and he might still be. I mean, that's kind of the crazy thing. And the ironic thing about Miles Brennan is that, for those who kind of followed his story, he was kind of the blue chip guy, but everybody always said he's going to have to gain weight to be able to play quarterback at LSU, and then he finally gains weight and in trying to replace Joe Burrow, and then over the course of the last 2 years, he played in 3 games because of injuries. So I think Brian Kelly looked at that situation and basically just decided he didn't want to necessarily rely on him to be his starter. And that is a full quarterback room that Brian Kelly has done a masterful job of building up, man. Like, everybody made fun of the first dancing video with Brian Kelly, but that was with Walker Howard, who was the incoming 5-star quarterback who was committed to the previous staff. So I kind of lost in the shuffle. That was a really big commitment to keep. And then, oh, by the way, you still got Garrett Nussmeier, who was billed as the next up-and-comer and was a true freshman this past season and was getting some reps in for Max Johnson. So, if I'm Jaden Daniels, I'm actually surprised that he entered the quarterback room that looks as full as it is. But Brian Kelly has 4 guys that I think a lot of Power 5 programs would really, really want. And all 4 of those guys, if they enter the transfer portal tomorrow, obviously Jaden Daniels being, most recent of that, they would have a significant market. So I tip my cap to LSU. I think Jaden Daniels is going to end up probably being the guy right now. But, yeah, it's not easy to build up that quarterback room when you take over like Brian Kelly did.
You did good stuff digging up some of the things that the NCAA tournament bound SEC basketball teams have not done and have a chance to do. And I mean, here's one that really blew me away. I hadn't realized it had been since 98-99 the last time that Arkansas had won games in tournaments back-to-back years. So, I mean, it feels like a foregone conclusion that they're going to get a good seed. You just can't take first-round victories for granted. But, man, you really did some digging for this. And you went with the 6 teams that we know are going to go into the tournament. And right now I'm not quite sure if you're going to get a 7th or an 8th. Maybe Florida or an A&M might be on the bubble, but it's looking like 6, and that's about it.
Yeah, I did have Florida in there as well. I had to stretch it a little bit, coming up with all of these 21st century feats that are on the table for every SEC team that's, on the cusp of an NCAA tournament berth. And for Florida, because what is Mike White going to do that Billy Donovan hasn't, right? It's so much easier for Muss, obviously, and for Nate Oates at Alabama and Bruce Pearl at Auburn. We can easily come up with stuff, but yeah, for looking at it for Florida, it's a little bit all over the place. Yeah, I mean, think about that, and it's such a difficult thing to do to get to that second weekend, but I think it's so important, man. I truly think in college basketball, you can't just judge a coach by NCAA tournament success. That's why I always kind of push back when people will say that Rick Barnes isn't a good coach because of what's happened in the tournament. He hasn't been to an Elite Eight since 2008, and despite the fact that he's got 25 NCAA tournament appearances in his coaching career. But, yeah, you look at a situation like Arkansas, and what would that do for the program? it would show that year in, year out, it doesn't really matter what the roster looks like. Eric Musselman is capable of getting a team to that level. Now, obviously, he's had guys that stay to the team, but think about how much he's done, with the transfer portal and how much he's used that to his advantage, and that's really becoming the norm across the conference. Florida's 7 leading scorers or whatever are all former transfers. I mean, obviously, you've seen teams like Auburn rely on that a lot, and Walker Kessler and K.D. Johnson and the minutes that they provided. So, yeah, it's just kind of an interesting thing to look at, and there would be a lot of people in Arkansas, of course, who would be feeling like that program will have taken a next step if they can get to that second weekend. I think that should be the goal for this year's squad.
And Connor, one thing that I love that Saturday Down South does the best is they know how to complement one SEC team while riling up another. And what better way do y'all do that than by giving out awards and, best atmosphere in this? And last week, I think it was last Thursday, y'all put out the best SEC hoops team, gave Arkansas the best coaching and best atmosphere. But boy, oh boy, why do people get so upset about this? And one of the arguments that I got sucked down into a Twitter hole about was the difference between best arena and best atmosphere. I mean, what is the difference?
It's fair, and I've debated that as well, because sometimes I think it's really cool to go to a place that only has 8,000 or 9,000 people and it's a gym. But at places like Arkansas or where I went to school at Indiana, you're getting more than 20,000 fans in there. And that to me speaks to the atmosphere more so than the actual venue itself. A place like Florida feels so pro style. I mean, it doesn't necessarily feel the same, the atmosphere is at that same level. But I think that, you look at kind of just the way that everything is set up, right? I usually put those two together. Now, I didn't write that story, so I can't necessarily speak to the specific reasoning behind that. But I think it's more about who is the fans that care the most. That speaks to the atmosphere. And then what's the type of place you just kind of walk in and you're just in amazement. You could go to Butler. Butler has as good of a venue as there is. Now, in terms of atmosphere and whatnot, you wouldn't necessarily say that's definitively number one because it's not the craziest, most wild fans. You go into Bud Walton, that's different. So I think that's kind of where the line is drawn. But, man, there's a lot of them in the SEC, and it's kind of cool to see all of these efforts that have been put in to be able to kind of build up those atmospheres, because for a while it seemed like there were only a handful of teams in the conference that really had truly elite places to be able to play, and Bud Walton has certainly put itself firmly in that conversation to be at the top of any list of the top atmospheres in sport.
Yeah, and now that the regular season is over, awards start coming out. We're getting to get coaches' awards. Today and we know, just like how people get mad about awards that you guys give out, that aren't. They're awards, but not real awards, like the coaches' awards, some of the media awards with All-American stuff that will be given out this week. People are going to be mad about them because they always are. Is there a situation or something that could be that might happen today with awards where you might say that's terrible? How can they vote that way? What's the point where it has to be to where you would get upset? I mean, is it somebody winning it over Oscar Tshiebwe? Is it a certain guy being left off of first or second team? Where would you draw the line?
Not putting Jalen Williams on second team just because you don't like the charges he takes. That would be, to me, that would be a little bit ridiculous. Look, I'll make fun of it, and I'll continue to say it's bad for the game, but he's still a phenomenal player, right? Anybody who watches Jalen Williams can separate those two things and can acknowledge that he is darn good and so important with what they're trying to do. Or if you say a guy has limited pro potential, therefore they're not a first-team guy. To me, that's just ridiculous. I don't think that'll be the case. I think Adam Spencer did a really good job of kind of breaking down what those first and second teams can look like in the SEC. I think J.D. Note, if you don't have him on your first team, really, what are you looking at, especially with how he's been playing down the stretch here? And then, to me, Jabari Smith is going to be the overwhelming, guy to get a lot of these national awards. He and Oscar Tshiebwe, of course, have earned the right to be considered for so many of these national awards And I think that, as long as you're not coming up with some weird bias based on that, like that to me is where kind of it's pretty easy to kind of figure out where some biases lie. The Jalen Williams thing, though, I could definitely see some people being like, oh, well, he can't be a second team if he does this, this, and this. And it's like, well, he's still a really, really good player, and you should probably acknowledge that.
Drew sat next to who he thinks is the most annoying fan that he's ever sat next to in a game. In a
Talkative
Memphis Tigers
know-it-all.
game over the weekend, he was Mr. Know-It-All. I've got one. I get annoyed at the fans that like to sit behind home plate at baseball games that don't belong there because they're making faces and they're and all the attention, and you actually do want to watch the game. The hand signals and all that kind of stuff can be fun every once in a while. I would really rather watch the game. Also, to like to to be told how to root when I'm there as a fan of a team. So for you, Connor, who? And it doesn't have to be like a real story or anything, but who is to you the most annoying fan?
Drunk fan's pretty bad because drunk fan can be all of those things.
You can.
And drunk fan can be know-it-all. Drunk fan can be spatially unaware. And drunk fan can be like, all right, like, is this person about to, like, get sick in public? You get those more so in, like, the college-type atmospheres. But that's the person I just cannot stand being around. Like, every once in a while, you go to a game and you get the kid who's kicking your back or something like that. You can turn around and say, hey, are we going to put an end to this? Then you can kind of put them in their place. You can't put a drunk person in their place. Or if you get a know-it-all, every once in a while, if you come over the top and you just wait for your right moment and you make that comment, sometimes that person just needs to be shut up and they need to be put in their place. And I've done that. I've done that before. That I feel like I can control. I can't control drunk guy. I just can't. And they check so many of those annoying boxes. To me, that's what I would avoid at all costs. And then, like, I've been in press box situations with Mr. Know-It-All as well, who just every single play thinks that they have to come up with the snarkiest comment. And it's just like, oh, my God, shut up. Just let me watch this game that I'm being paid to cover. Like, this isn't, we're not like buddies at a bar or something like that. So I think there are a variety of fans, but the drunk fan just kind of is an overarching annoyance in my book.
Yeah, it's kind of a community of fans with different ways that they can annoy you, but it does start with a little bit too much or way too much alcohol. Connor, appreciate you, man. Thanks so much. Have a great week.
Football might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pros and college hoops. For all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. Head over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Use our promo code BELIEVE to get started. That's promo code BLEAV. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage, is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your #1 online wagering destination. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline, where the game starts.